Whilst public television still survives, we still have access. There are two ways. This is one way. We still have access to documentary programs that help us to understand more about the human condition. And a number of those moved me enough in the last year for me to write songs which appear on this album. To wit, the beginning song on the album, The Ballad of Bill Hubbard, derives specifically from a program I saw about the survivors of the battles of the River Somme from the First World War, and specifically to a story of a man who fails to save his friend who's fatally wounded and he has to leave him. What moved me about that was that the guy was still worrying about it 75 years later. And it makes you think about what is the essential nature of the human being, that a man can carry the guilt of having survived a war like that for 75 years with him. It shows how loyal we can be to one another if the circumstances prevail. And there are a number of instances of that. And the other way I think that television can help us is as it blasts its white-hot lies about how good the free market is at us, because of the white heat of the medium, it bleeds out of the side, in my view. So, for instance, to hark back to the Gulf War, the CNN coverage of the Gulf War, with its appended commercials and with its pretend news, was so blatantly not instant history, but instant propaganda, that it forces a lot of us into understanding that fact, and therefore it calls into question the whole way that we organize our lives and the way we communicate with one another. God once changed us. Any philosophy that I might espouse in this interview or through my records or anything else, all has to do with my idea that that the French were right, you know, or some of them were in 1791 or whenever it was that they made the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and where we started to understand that the possibility exists that the individual rights of the human being are important when weighed against the rights of the king or the church or all the other bureaucracies and bits and pieces of the way feudalism worked before then. So, sorry, I've lost the question. What was the question? I think part of the way we need to express our human freedoms and our human individuality is to cherish our particular and specific cultural and ethnic differences, which is another reason why I don't accept satellite television as necessarily being a good thing. If it helps us to understand by communicating globally each other's cultural and ethnic differences, and therefore to understand why some of us may play music loud at night, annoying others of us, or, I mean, I'm being glib, but then it's a good thing. If it tries to apply a new, relatively meaningless kind of plastic overall global culture over the world, then it's extremely damaging because it makes people feel bad about living. So when Ted Turner pats himself on the back for having bought the Hanna-Barbera catalogue, we should all say to him in a loud voice, Ted, don't pat yourself on the back. This is not only not a very good thing, it's a very, very bad thing. We don't want the rest of the world covered with all these mediocre American animated films, you know. We'd much rather that maybe our children did something else on Saturday and Sunday morning. That's my view. Jeff Beck, I've always loved his playing, and I felt when I'd recorded 4 or 5 of these numbers that he could probably play great guitar over them. So I made a cassette of the numbers that I thought, like 3 Wishes and What God Wants, and God Wants Part 1 and Part 3. And managed to get him to come up to London and sent the cassette over, and he sat down and listened to them, so on his own in a room, so he wouldn't have to tell me if he didn't like them to my face. And he did like them, and so he came to the studio and we worked together for a week. And I think his playing is magical, and I'm thrilled by it. Other people like Don Henley, for instance, I just suddenly thought, well, maybe this song would work with a harmony in it, you know? And there's always I often get the feeling, you know, oh my God, my voice, you know, it's going to get really dull. People to just listen to my voice all the time. And so if there are songs that lend themselves to, you know, to cooperation from other singers who I admire, well, then I'll ask them. And then you send them the song, and they go, yeah, I'll do it, or no, I won't do it. And Don Henley liked that song, so he came along and sang it. Rita Coolidge, I'd tried a number of singers singing the background parts in the music, and none of them were quite sexy enough. And Rita Coolidge has the sexiest voice in the history of rock, and I'd always been a big fan, so I took the opportunity to ask her if she'd do it. God wants borders, God wants crack. If I was looking to trace an evolution in my songwriting, I'd go back to Meddle, you know, or Echoes, or even Saucer Full of Secrets, you know, so, because it's a very, very long process. And in terms of writing, you can go Amused to Death, Radio Chaos, Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, Final Cut, The Wall, Animals, Wish You Were Here, and then it starts going into grey areas. No, I don't think so. They're very different things. The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking was partially me writing about sex, and partially finding my way through that particular minefield, and partially me attempting to create something that in essence was like Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. You remember the Bob Dylan, it was the whole side of Blonde on Blonde, and it just went on and on and on and on. I love that thing of this kind of lilting acoustic guitar and voice that went on forever. Vodka, tobacco, and bread. Radio Chaos was a linear narrative, and I went a bit modern there. You know, I'm not sure that Radio Chaos is one of my best paintings, so I don't think there's really much linear connection. However, the preoccupations are all the same. In all of them, I'm concerned with the importance of this bit of us that's inside us all, the central, you know, core of the individual human being, and I'm interested in his or her freedom. You saw those young people in that square in their spectacles, is what I think of, strangely enough, you know, with their brave talk, you know, and their Statue of Liberty, and I felt extraordinary sadness with my anger when I saw what the Chinese leaders did to them. And I remember the early history of that revolution in 1948, because my mother used to take me to British-China Friendship Association meetings, and I used to sit, you know, when I was this high, watching heroic films about the heroic People's Army fighting Chiang Kai-shek and the puppet government of the Japanese, and so on and so forth, and the disillusion that the wheel should have turned full circle, and that the old cynical, callous men clinging desperately with their withered claws to the trappings of power should be perpetrating precisely the same atrocities, i.e. the murder of women and children, that Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalist forces apparently were propagating, you know, were committing in 1947 and 48. That was the reason that the revolution happened. And the irony of that was sad enough to make me weep, and following the tears comes the song. The reason that I make up a history for the girl is in order to And the reason as well, I've been accused of sexism and racism by people who listen to this song. The reason I talk about yellow thighs and perfect breasts and things, and the fact that her father's an engineer, is to absolutely insist that this is an ordinary, person who you can hold, who somebody can love. She's not an icon. She's not, it's not a name carved in stone on a memorial. It's one perfectly ordinary, living, breathing human being who we miss, but who is important to us because we saw that on a television set. Well, we all know that that's nonsense because the United States of America doesn't give a shit about people's freedom. It never has. Although its constitution avows that, that the basic freedoms are the right of all its own citizens, which we know also that doesn't take place either. But their foreign policy has never had much to do with the freedoms of individual other people. We don't care who we buy the oil from, we never have. It doesn't matter to us whether we buy it from Iran or Iraq, Saddam Hussein, the Saudi royal family or the Kuwaiti royal family, or wherever. That's irrelevant to us. So why did we fight that war there? I think probably because it was always going to be easy, A, and B, because it was politically expedient for the political leaders at home. George Bush could go in there with a Bible in one hand and a 45 in the other and turn from George the Wimp into John Wayne overnight. And he did, and now he wants to do it again because there's an election coming up.